So picture this. You are sitting at a massive, highly polished diplomatic table in Beijing.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. And you're watching the leaders of the world's two biggest superpowers sit down for this, highly anticipated, globally watched summit.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Exactly. Now, on one side, the host is pointing to a massive, glowing red line issue. I mean, they are making it the absolute center of the conversation.
Right.
And on the other side, the visiting leader is acting like they didn't even hear a word of it.
Which is wild.
It is. Why did the U.S. completely ignore the biggest red line in global politics? Today, we are taking our sources and we're decoding the diplomatic doublespeak of that recent Trump-Xi summit.
We really need to get into this.
Yeah, we're going to find out exactly how Taiwan got quietly sidelined by this massive cross-continental grand bargain.
A bargain involving 200 Boeing planes, the Strait of Hormuz, and a completely different crisis in the Middle East.
Welcome to the deep dive. It really is a classic diplomatic puzzle, isn't it?
It totally is. Because if you followed the lead up to this summit, the headline issue, the thing everyone expected to dominate the room was Taiwan.
Right. It was supposed to be a total showdown.
Exactly. And yet the narrative totally flipped behind closed doors. In international relations, silence is a highly calculated strategy.
Oh, for sure.
And the silence here was absolutely deafening.
That silence is exactly where we need to start, because the contrast in the official readouts from the summit is honestly just jarring.
It's like two different meetings happened.
Seriously. On the Chinese side, Xi Jinping explicitly called the Taiwan issue the most important issue.
He drew a hard red line.
Yeah, a hard red line. It was front and center in their press release. But then, you look at the White House summary.
And Taiwan is entirely omitted.
Just completely absent from the text. And Trump was unusually restrained. He flat out dodged questions from reporters about it.
The White House press team basically gave a non-answer. Right.
Right. And the U.S. Treasury Secretary just kind of shrugged, said U.S. policy hasn't changed, and, maybe the president will bring it up in a few days.
Which tells you immediately that there is a massive disconnect between the public posturing and the private reality.
Yeah.
You have two completely different stories being told about the exact same room.
It sounds exactly like a negotiation where one guy is screaming about an elephant in the room and the other is totally fascinated by a potted plant in the corner.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. Why is the U.S. suddenly playing deaf on an issue that has, dominated the Pacific for decades?
Well, according to the analysis in our sources, it comes down to geopolitical triage.
Triage, like in a hospital.
Exactly like that.
Right.
When you sit at that table, you have to separate the immediate bleeding crises from the long-term chronic conditions.
Okay, that makes sense.
For China, Taiwan is the core issue. It is always the red line. But the current U.S. assessment is that Taiwan, while incredibly important, it doesn't present an immediate exploding crisis right this second.
So it's a simmering pot, but it's not boiling over onto the stove today.
Exactly. Now compare that to the Middle East.
Oh, yeah. Completely different story.
The dispatches we're looking at highlight that the Middle East right now features daily active warfare. You have drone strikes. You have the persistent threat of blocked shipping lanes.
Right, and all of that directly feeds into global oil price spikes.
Which immediately translates to massive inflation back in the United States.
Right.
So faced with that reality, the U.S. chose to prioritize the bleeding wound over the chronic condition. You got to stop the bleeding first.
And to stop that bleeding, you basically let the host yell about the elephant. You stare at the potted plant and you refuse to turn it into a screaming match.
Precisely. By not taking the bait on the Taiwan rhetoric, the U.S. managed to quietly pivot the actual substantive negotiation to the Middle East.
So if they aren't fighting over Taiwan, they are making deals somewhere else. And our sources say the real consensus in that room was heavily focused on Iran.
It was almost entirely focused on Iran, and the specifics are really fascinating. Both sides came to a hard agreement that Iran absolutely cannot possess nuclear weapons.
Which is a massive bragging right for the U.S. administration. I mean, Trump can take that straight home and hold it up as a major diplomatic victory.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fulfillment of his stated goal to stabilize these global hotspots. It's a huge win domestically.
Right.
But the agreement goes much further than just theoretical alignment on nukes. Xi actually committed to not sending military equipment to Iran to fight the U.S. or Israel.
Wait, really?
Yeah. And even more critically for the global economy, China expressed a willingness to help ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, let's just pause on the Strait of Hormuz for a second, because that is basically the ultimate bottleneck for the world's oil supply.
It is the choke point.
Yeah, if that closes, the global economy basically grinds to a halt. How exactly is China helping there, and, why do they suddenly care about U.S. interests in the Middle East?
Well, here's the thing. They don't necessarily care about U.S. interests.
Right.
They care about their own economy.
Right.
China's stated reasoning is fiercely pragmatic. They oppose the militarization of the strait, and they oppose any kind of toll being set up by regional actors.
Because they buy the oil.
Quite simply because China wants to buy more U.S. oil. They are a massive energy importer. They need those shipping lanes open, stable, and cheap, just as much as Washington does.
Okay, but geopolitics isn't a charity.
Definitely not.
I buy that China wants cheap oil, but casually agreeing to help the U.S. box in Iran and secure the Middle East. That is a massive strategic favor.
Huge.
They don't just hand over a geopolitical victory of that scale without a heavy price tag attached, right?
You've hit on the core of the entire summit right there. There is a deeply complex transaction happening here. The U.S. gets its Middle East stability and a denuclearized Iran. In exchange, China is leveraging this cooperation to extract some highly specific concessions from Washington.
And the sources point to a very shiny object right in the middle of this trade, a massive gift of 200 Boeing planes.
Right.
Like, China is agreeing to buy 200 airplanes from a major American manufacturer.
Yeah, and on paper, that is a huge economic injection for American manufacturing. Yeah. It looks fantastic for the U.S. economy.
Sure.
But strategically, it's a lever. China is presenting this massive purchase alongside their cooperation on Iran to sort of soften the ground for what they actually want.
The real shopping list.
Exactly. They are looking for U.S. concessions on a few deeply important fronts. Specifically, they want relief on fentanyl-related tariffs.
Okay.
They are pushing hard for a relaxation of export controls on NVIDIA chips. And they're looking for a muted U.S. response regarding the Jimmy Lai case.
Wow. Okay, we need to break those down because that is quite a list.
That's a lot.
Let's start with NVIDIA chips. Why are microchips suddenly on the same negotiating table as Middle Eastern security?
Because NVIDIA chips are the absolute lifeblood of the global artificial intelligence race.
Right, the AI boom.
Exactly. The U.S. has placed heavy export controls on these advanced chips to prevent China from dominating the AI sector.
Because AI has massive military and economic implications.
Spot on. China needs those controls relaxed to fuel its own tech industry. So they are using their leverage in the Middle East to pry those export doors open.
That makes total sense. And then there's the Jimmy Lai case. For those listening who might not follow Hong Kong politics closely, Jimmy Lai is a very prominent pro-democracy publisher and activist.
A massive thorn in Beijing's side.
Right. Why does Xi Jinping care so much about what the U.S. says about one guy in Hong Kong that he's willing to trade Boeing planes and Iranian leverage for it?
It's about domestic control. Beijing wants to project absolute internal security. They want to manage the Hong Kong narrative without international interference. If they can get the United States to look the other way, or at least, soften its public criticism regarding Jimmy Lai, it's a massive validation of their authority.
It just removes a persistent point of friction.
Exactly.
So it's this multi-layered global horse trade. We get a win in the Middle East, we sell 200 airplanes, and in return, we ease up on your tech sector, back off on some tariffs, and keep quiet on internal affairs.
That's the grand bargain.
But that brings us right back to the beginning. If the U.S. is extracting all this vital help regarding Iran, does Taiwan pay the price for that cooperation?
That's the big question.
Right. Does the U.S. have to dial back its support for Taiwan to keep Beijing happy enough to maintain this Middle East deal?
That is the exact tension analysts are obsessing over. But the analysis from Tamking University professor Lin Yu, which is featured heavily in our sources, he argues that it's not a simple binary.
Okay.
It is practically and politically impossible for the U.S. to completely stop arms sales to Taiwan.
Why is that?
The institutional support in Washington, the defense establishment, the legal frameworks, they're simply too strong for a total halt.
So we aren't pulling out of the driveway entirely. It's more of a menu swap.
A menu swap. I like that.
Yeah, like the U.S. is looking at Taiwan and saying, listen, we will still sell you the car. You're getting the car, but we're going to take out the turbocharged engine.
Right.
The U.S. is shifting the quality of the support rather than the quantity.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. Professor Lin provides a very specific example from the military catalog to show how this works in practice.
Okay, what is it?
He suggests the U.S. might hold back on selling highly advanced long-range strike weapons, like the HIMARS systems.
Ah, okay. And that matters because a HIMARS system, being long-range, is inherently more offensive.
Exactly.
Or at least Beijing perceives a weapon that can strike deep across the strait as a much higher threat than, say, short-range defensive missiles.
Spot on. By withholding the high-end long-range systems, but maintaining the overall volume of basic defensive arms sales, the U.S. performs this brilliant balancing act.
They fulfill their historical commitments to Taiwan.
They keep selling the car.
Yeah, they keep selling the car, but they simultaneously offer China a calculated, tangible downgrade.
It gives Xi Jinping just enough to go back to his generals and say, look, we pushed the Americans back. We got a concession.
Right.
And that specific calculated concession is what allows the two sides to maintain what the sources call a constructive, strategic, stable relationship.
It calibrates the tension.
Exactly. You keep it just low enough to avoid a military collision in the Pacific, which gives you the breathing room to keep cooperating on the immediate crises, like Iran.
Man, if they are threading a needle this small, trading Middle East security for microchips and quietly downgrading missile sales to avoid a war, the tension in the physical room must be completely insane.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But reading the dispatches, the vibe was the exact opposite. The optics are crucial in diplomacy, and the optics here were incredibly carefully managed. Despite all the underlying tension over tech wars and red lines, the overall mood of the summit was described as friendly.
Friendly.
It was visibly elevating U.S.-China relations.
There was one detail that really stood out regarding how Trump was treated physically during the visit. He was given a working lunch at Zongnanhai.
Right, and for context, for those who don't know, Zongnanhai isn't just a government building. It is the absolute core power center of the Chinese Communist Party.
It's the central headquarters.
Yes.
It's essentially their White House, Pentagon, and Capitol Hill rolled into one highly secure, closed compound.
Exactly. And hosting a foreign leader for a meal inside Zongnanhai is an honor usually reserved only for the absolute closest friends of Beijing.
The sources specifically mention leaders like Russia's Vladimir Putin or Belarus's Lukashenko.
The inner circle.
Right,
Yeah.
the inner circle. So bringing an American president into that specific space is a massive optical statement.
It really is.
It's Xi Jinping visually communicating to the world, we are doing serious, high-level business as equals.
It projects stability to both the global markets and the domestic audience in China. It says that despite the trade rhetoric, the two superpowers have a functional, managed relationship.
But you can't have a needle-threading summit of this magnitude without someone accidentally tripping over the needle.
Oh, man.
And the sources highlighted a historical gaffe that is just, it's excruciating.
You're talking about the state banquet speech.
Yes. Okay, picture this. They are at the glittering state banquet. The mood is good, the optics are perfect. Trump gets up to give his remarks, and he decides to praise the historical U.S.-China alliance during World War II.
Which is a totally standard diplomatic move.
Right, highlight a time when you fought on the same side to build goodwill. But his speechwriters made a catastrophic historical error.
They wrote the speech referring to the People's Republic of China.
The PRC. But historically, during World War II, the United States was allied with the Republic of China.
Which is Taiwan.
Which is Taiwan. The PRC didn't even exist yet.
It is a profound historical irony. In a summit where the U.S. is bending over backward to carefully manage the optics around Taiwan.
To the point of omitting the word entirely from the official readout.
Exactly. They do all that, and then the speechwriters accidentally credit the modern mainland government with the historical military alliance of Taiwan.
I get secondhand anxiety just thinking about the translator having to look Xi Jinping in the eye and deliver that line in real time.
It's brutal.
It's a perfect example of how incredibly delicate this entire dance is. One wrong word, one historical slip-up from a speechwriter, and you've accidentally stomped right on the red line you spent the whole day avoiding.
It really highlights the sheer complexity of the relationship. It's layered with so much history and unresolved tension that a basic reference can become a diplomatic minefield.
Definitely.
But if we zoom out from that gaffe, the sources point to one final brilliant piece of scheduling that sums up the entire geopolitical picture perfectly.
And this actually ties back to the Iran deal, right?
It does. Remember, Trump actually delayed his trip to Beijing to deal with the Iran situation first.
Okay, yeah.
He had to secure the Middle East pieces on the board before he sat down at the table in China.
Right. But because he delayed the trip, the schedule shifted. And the result is that Trump ends up leaving Beijing just as Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives.
Practically passing each other on the tarmac.
That is wild.
Now, the sources note that this was technically a coincidence caused by Trump's delay. But in geopolitics, you never let a good coincidence go to waste.
Oh, the optics of that are an absolute gold mine for China.
Think about what it projects to the rest of the planet. Within a single month, Beijing is hosting the leader of the United States, securing massive trade deals and Middle East cooperation,
Right.
and then immediately turning around and hosting the leader of Russia. It perfectly highlights China's ultimate overarching goal.
Which is to establish itself as the absolute center of global affairs.
Exactly.
They are presenting themselves as the unavoidable strategic pivot point of the world. Whether it's peace in the Middle East, the war in Europe, or the global economy, all roads must lead through Beijing.
They want to be the ones talking to everyone, balancing everyone.
It's a masterclass in positioning.
It really is.
So let's pull all of this together because we've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started out looking for a classic showdown over Taiwan. We expected a dramatic, table-thumping confrontation over a red line.
But what the dispatches revealed was a much more intricate, quiet reality.
Yeah.
We discovered a complex web where the most vital issues aren't necessarily the loudest ones in the press release.
You found a reality where 200 Boeing planes and Iranian nuclear ambitions are essentially being traded like playing cards across entirely different continents.
Everything is carefully calibrated.
Right. The U.S. gets its bleeding wound in the Middle East bandaged, securing the oil supply and taming inflation.
And in return, China gets prestige, airplanes, and a strategic easing of pressure on its vital tech sector.
And Taiwan, caught right in the middle of it all, sees a subtle menu swap in its defense relationship.
Trading advanced long-range missile systems for the broader continuation of basic security support.
It really is a masterclass in transactional diplomacy.
Absolutely.
It totally changes how you watch the evening news because it makes you wonder if world peace and global stability now rely entirely on superpowers trading favors across entirely different continents.
Right.
Like exchanging Middle Eastern oil security for Asian microchips and brittle arms adjustments. What happens when the scale tips too far?
That's the scary part.
Yeah. What happens if a localized crisis breaks out tomorrow that is so intense, so deeply critical to one side, that neither side has enough bargaining chips left on the other side of the world to trade for it?
When you run out of Boeing planes and trade tariffs,
What's left to trade?
that is the terrifying question, hiding behind every one of these so-called constructive summits.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep questioning the official readouts, keep looking past the headlines, and we will catch you next time.